The rotunda of the U.S. Capitol was glowing under the grand chandelier light, polished marble catching every shimmer like a stage set for history. Dozens of chairs faced a raised wooden podium where newly elected officials were lined up to take their ceremonial oath. The air was thick with formality. American flags lined the walls, gold-trimmed banners hung above, and murmurs of press, aides, and political elites filled the space. Among the rows of dark suits and muted faces, Karoline Leavitt stood out. At 27, she wasn't just the youngest figure in the room, she was the most watched. Her crimson-red blazer was sharp and intentional, the silver cross at her collar a quiet rebellion against a room that often preferred its faith behind closed doors. She held a slim leather folder in her hands, the notes for her brief statement ready, but it wasn't nerves she felt. It was fire. Her supporters watched from the upper gallery, some teary-eyed, others holding their breath. Karoline had not just survived D.C., she had disrupted it. And now, at this nationally televised ceremony, she was set to deliver a short but powerful remark immediately after the oath. Just 90 seconds. 1.5 minutes. That was the arrangement. She rehearsed it in her mind, a reference to her roots, a defense of constitutional values, and a reminder of why she stood on that platform in the first place. Not because she was chosen by elites, but by people who felt forgotten. But standing just feet away from the podium was Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader. He'd made no effort to hide his skepticism about Karoline's rise. To him, she was a flash in the pan, a press secretary with a Twitter following and too much confidence. He had lobbied behind the scenes to shorten her time, to push her off the main list entirely, but tradition had prevailed, for now. As the officials recited the oath, the cameras zoomed in. Karoline's lips moved with conviction. To defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Her hand hovered over her heart, her expression unwavering. Then came the moment. The applause was brief. Aid cues moved swiftly. The room expected ceremonial transitions, but Karoline stepped forward, gripping the mic. Chuck Schumer tilted his head slightly. From the corner of the room, a floor manager raised an eyebrow. Karoline's supporters leaned forward. And just as she opened her mouth to speak, Schumer gave a small gesture to a technician in the back. The mic went dead. Karoline blinked. The lights stayed on, the cameras rolled, but no sound came from her lips. The room stilled for a heartbeat. Her mouth formed the opening lines, but the silence was deafening. In that moment, she realized this wasn't a glitch. It was deliberate, and Karoline Leavitt had never been one to stay silent. Karoline stood still for a second, blinking into the crowd, her mouth still forming words no one could hear. Her voice had been cut, but her expression stayed firm, chin lifted, eyes locked on the cameras that were still filming. It didn't matter if the mic was dead. She had already clocked the move. Chuck Schumer hadn't flinched. His arms were folded, his gaze cast downward, as if it was just another procedural bump, nothing personal. But it was personal. Everyone knew it. From the back of the room, a whisper moved like wind through dry grass. The press started murmuring. A few aides looked nervously toward the AV booth. Karoline's supporters in the gallery shifted uncomfortably, some of them standing, trying to understand what just happened. She turned slowly toward Schumer. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, and Karoline could read the quiet satisfaction in his face. This was no accident. This was a message. You don't get to speak here. Not today, not like that, not with your people watching. But Karoline had already learned a hard truth in Washington. Sometimes you don't wait for permission to speak. Sometimes you walk out and speak louder than they ever wanted you to. Without a word, she stepped back from the podium. The technicians froze, unsure whether to restore her mic. Security tilted their heads, confused. But Karoline didn't ask questions. She turned, heels clicking on marble, the red of her blazer flashing like a flag in retreat. But it wasn't retreat. It was repositioning. As she passed the row of officials, some stared ahead blankly. A few made eye contact. A junior senator from Ohio gave her the faintest nod of solidarity. One aide mouthed, "I'm so sorry." But Karoline didn't blink. She pushed through the double doors and into the Capitol hallway, where a dozen members of the press had gathered outside watching the ceremony through screens. She stopped, then turned to face them. A Fox reporter with a live feed held out a mic instinctively. Karoline didn't wait to be asked. She took the mic, turned to the nearest camera and said, clear as thunder, "They cut my mic, but they didn't cut the truth." The sound of camera shutters exploded in the hall. Chuck Schumer decided that 90 seconds of honesty was too dangerous for America to hear, she continued, her voice calm but ringing with steel. "I stood to speak about God, country, and the Constitution. Apparently that's now controversial in the Capitol." The journalists leaned in, their live feeds blinking red. "So I'll speak it here," she said, not from behind their podium, but directly to the American people. Behind her, aides scrambled. Someone from Schumer's office shouted for her to stop, but she didn't. Karoline had just gone off script and the nation was already watching. Within seconds, the hallway outside the Capitol ceremony transformed from a silent corridor into a national stage. Every camera light blinked on. Every journalist with a mic pushed forward. The networks that had been airing the ceremony began cutting to Karoline's impromptu speech, realizing the real story wasn't at the podium. It was unfolding in real time outside the chamber. Karoline held the mic firmly, her silver cross glinting in the hallway lights, her tone steady but electric. "I came today to fulfill a duty, to take an oath, to speak for those who sent me here, and to say something simple, that America belongs to its people, not its politicians." Gasps echoed around her as her words spread through live streams and social media feeds. Staffers nearby fumbled with earpieces. The Capitol press pool scrambled to reallocate coverage. She went on. "I had a statement. Just 90 seconds. I was going to speak about how my grandparents immigrated here with nothing. I was going to mention the factory workers back home in New Hampshire who tell me they feel forgotten. I wanted to remind the country that free speech doesn't expire just because someone in power is uncomfortable." The statement she'd prepared was in the folder under her arm, but now she didn't need it. Every word came straight from her gut. From conviction, not convenience. "Senator Schumer cut my mic," she said plainly. "He silenced me at a public ceremony, one meant to celebrate the very Constitution he claims to protect. He may hold the microphone inside that room, but I hold the message out here, and I know which one the people care about." The press around her stood stunned. Even some of the more liberal-leaning reporters couldn't hide their intrigue. A CNN producer whispered to his cameraman, "We might be watching a moment here." Social media lit up like wildfire. On X, hashtags like "Let Karoline Speak" and "Cut by Schumer" began trending in under 5 minutes. Clips of her speech were being reposted by the second. Thousands were watching not from a marble hall, but from smartphones, offices, classrooms. She had lost the mic, but gained the megaphone. Schumer's aides scrambled behind the scenes, issuing bland statements about technical difficulties and timing miscommunications, but no one was buying it. The video of him subtly signaling the technician had already gone viral, dissected frame by digital sleuths. Karoline finished her statement not with a flourish, but with a challenge. "To every American who feels their voice is too small to be heard, remember this moment. I wasn't allowed to speak in their chamber, but I'm speaking in yours. Because the truth isn't filtered through microphones. It comes from the people, and I serve them." She handed the mic back to the reporter, gave a tight nod, and walked down the hallway. Not defeated, but defiant. And that was the clip that rocketed through every screen in the country. By the time Karoline reached her office that afternoon, the Capitol felt like it was vibrating with backlash. Staffers were glued to screens. Phones buzzed with non-stop alerts. Every major network, left, right, and center, had pivoted their coverage. No one was talking about the oath ceremony anymore. They were talking about her. Inside her office, a team of aides and interns sat stunned. One of them looked up from her laptop. "Fox just replayed your speech 3 times in a row," she whispered. "Even CNN is running it. They're calling it the moment Schumer lost control of the narrative." Karoline didn't gloat. She simply removed her red blazer, draped it over the back of her chair, and pulled up the live stream. A conservative commentator was mid-monologue. Whether you agree with her or not, Karoline Leavitt proved something today. That power doesn't always sit behind the podium. Sometimes it walks out of the room and says what no one else dares to. Then came the calls. Donald Trump's name flashed on her screen first. She picked up. "You were fire," he said bluntly. "You made Schumer look like a censor and yourself like a patriot. That wasn't just good, it was historical. Keep going." Karoline thanked him, her tone calm but steady. She was used to praise from the MAGA crowd, but this moment felt different. This wasn't just about her. It was about a message that millions clearly needed to hear. Next came Senator Josh Hawley, then Elise Stefanik, then Tulsi Gabbard, surprisingly, all expressing support, all offering airtime, stage time, more exposure. But Karoline waved them off for now. She needed to think, not ride the wave. This wasn't a stunt. It was a stand. Meanwhile, online sentiment exploded. "Let Karoline Speak" trended #1 worldwide on X for over 4 hours. Videos of the moment her mic was cut were edited into slow-motion clips, some paired with dramatic music, others with captions like, "This is what censorship looks like in 2025. She didn't flinch, she walked. Chuck cut the mic, she raised the nation. Liberals scrambled to manage the fallout. Schumer's press team released a flat apology. "There were technical errors during the ceremony that we regret. We respect all voices." But screenshots of his nod to the sound tech had already been freeze-framed across the internet. Late-night shows pounced. One host quipped, "If Karoline's mic was any more off, it would have been hosted by MSNBC." The line drew laughter, but even that couldn't dull the impact. Something had cracked through the usual noise of Washington. And Karoline? She sat at her desk, reviewing footage, sipping black coffee, and jotting down notes. A press conference was being requested. Interview slots were opening up across all networks. Even The View had reached out. But she wasn't rushing. This time she would speak on her terms, and next time, no one would cut her mic. The following morning, the Capitol was still spinning. Editorials flooded every outlet. Conservative voices hailed Karoline as a warrior for free speech. Even a few progressive columnists cautiously admitted, off the record, that Schumer's decision had handed her a megaphone. But the most powerful response didn't come from a politician. It came from the people. Videos of Karoline's walkout were posted in town halls, coffee shops, high school classrooms. Parents played the clip for their kids. Churches replayed her hallway speech on Sunday. Truckers shared it from the road. One video, showing Karoline turning to the Fox mic and saying, "They cut my mic, but not the truth," had surpassed 15 million views overnight. Karoline, now fully aware of the fire she had lit, prepared carefully. She knew she couldn't just let the moment ride. She needed to seize it, not for ego, but for every person who had been silenced, mocked, or told to stay in their lane. She scheduled a press conference, not in the Capitol, not on Fox, but outside, on the East Lawn, the same steps where generations had marched, protested, and demanded to be heard. At noon, she stepped up to the podium, red blazer again, silver cross gleaming, no teleprompter, just a handheld mic and a crowd of reporters hungry for round two. "I was elected to speak for the people," she began, her voice clear and controlled. "But when I tried to speak yesterday, just 90 seconds of truth, they shut me down. Not because I lied, not because I disrespected anyone, but because I refused to play their script." The cameras zoomed in, phones went up, social media lit up again. She pointed to the Capitol dome behind her. "That building does not own my voice. Chuck Schumer does not own my mic. And the American people should never feel like their voices have to be filtered through party approval." Reporters called out questions. "Do you believe it was intentional? Was it censorship? Will you press charges?" But Karoline didn't bite. She smiled, then answered with calm fire. "They know what they did. And so do you. That's why you're all here." The applause wasn't just polite. It was organic, rising from small clusters of bystanders who had wandered toward the lawn as her voice carried. As she closed the speech, She looked straight into the cameras and spoke not as a press secretary or politician, but as someone channeling the frustration of millions. To anyone watching who's ever been silenced, shut down, talked over, or pushed out of the room, walk out. Say your truth anyway, because if you wait for permission, you'll never speak at all. She stepped back, let the mic fall quiet this time, by choice, and walked off the steps as chants of "Karoline, Karoline" began to ripple from the back of the crowd. Inside the Capitol, Chuck Schumer reportedly slammed his office door shut. The ripple effect from Karoline's East Lawn speech reached every corner of the political world. Major papers ran side-by-side headlines. One column quoting Schumer's regret over audio confusion, the other displaying Karoline's closing line in bold, "If you wait for permission, you'll never speak at all." Behind closed doors, Schumer's team scrambled. Internally, they labeled the debacle a messaging disaster. His communications director urged him to issue a stronger apology, but Schumer refused. "I'm not legitimizing her circus," he snapped. But outside the Beltway, voters weren't buying technical malfunction as an excuse. A viral TikTok broke it down like courtroom evidence. 1. Schumer's head nod. 2. Technician's immediate action. 3. Karoline's mic cut. 4. The exact moment her lips moved with no sound. The clip had racked up 23 million views in 36 hours. Meanwhile, Karoline returned to work unfazed. She didn't host victory laps or tweet smug reactions. She focused. She had hundreds of emails, over 200 interview requests, and calls from dozens of local leaders across red and swing states, asking her to come speak in person. Some called her the new Gen Z lion of the right. Others called her something more simple, the voice they tried to silence. She picked only one interview to accept first. 60 Minutes. Not a safe space, not a right-wing echo chamber, but the toughest stage she could find. "I want the hard questions," she told her aide. "Let's show them I can hold my own where they said I don't belong." Back at the Capitol, aides reported Schumer's mood had soured. The incident had re-energized Karoline's base and even drawn independents to her side. A morning poll showed 62% of viewers believed Schumer had cut her mic intentionally. Worse, in that same poll, 45% of Gen Z voters said they were now more interested in hearing from Karoline. The tide had turned, and she hadn't even needed a studio. That afternoon, while reviewing briefing notes, Karoline received an envelope from her New Hampshire team. Inside was a handwritten note from a high school civics teacher. It read, "My students watched what happened. Today, they all asked how they could get more involved in politics, not because of policy, but because of your courage." Karoline smiled softly. She slid the note into her folder. That was why she did this. Not to fight Chuck Schumer, not to trend for a day, but to awaken something in those who had been told they were too young, too loud, or too out of line to be heard. She had walked out, and now the whole country was listening. By the third day, Karoline's name wasn't just on cable news. It was echoing through Senate corridors. In one closed-door caucus lunch, a Democratic senator from Pennsylvania leaned in and whispered to a colleague, "We handed her a moment, and she ran with it like she's been doing this for 20 years. Chuck Schumer, visibly tense, dismissed the talk with a wave. "She's a flash in the pan. Give it a week." But even he didn't believe it. That morning, Karoline's 60 Minutes appearance had aired, and it wasn't just good. It was seismic. The interviewer tried everything, pressing her on Trump, asking if she was exploiting the incident, even implying that she had orchestrated it for attention. But Karoline never flinched. Her responses were sharp, grounded, and free of spin. "If telling the truth off script is a political strategy, then maybe more people should try it," she said, her tone calm but electric. Clips of the interview flooded the web. A new generation of voters who didn't watch live TV reposted it with captions like, "She ate that," and "This is how you hold your ground." Even people who didn't agree with her politically admitted, "She stayed composed. She's serious." Meanwhile, Senate staffers buzzed with speculation. Rumors began that Schumer's leadership team was quietly reviewing procedural protocol, looking for ways to prevent another such embarrassment. He wants new speaking guidelines, one aide leaked anonymously. Not for decorum, for control. Karoline, meanwhile, focused on preparation. She'd been invited to speak at 3 major conservative conferences. One mainstream tech CEO even invited her to appear at a digital freedom summit, citing her as a case study in real-world censorship and resilience. That night, in a quiet corner of her apartment, Karoline FaceTimed her parents. Her mother, eyes misty, said, "I just saw you on the news." Again. "Are you okay?" Karoline smiled. "I'm more than okay, but it's a little crazy, huh?" Her father chimed in, grinning. "You've stirred the hornet's nest, kiddo. Good. It needed shaking." As the call ended, she turned off her phone and opened her notebook. At the top of the page, in bold letters, she wrote, "They silenced me in their house, so I'll speak in the people's." She looked out at the Capitol dome from her window, glowing faintly in the distance. She wasn't done. 2 days later, Karoline received a message that made even her senior aides blink twice, an official invitation from Georgetown University's Political Dialogue Forum. The subject line was simple: speech request, Gen Z and the future of free expression. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The same elite circles that once scoffed at her rise were now asking her to speak because they had to. She was no longer just a communications director. She had become a cultural force, a living symbol of how one silenced moment could reverberate louder than 1,000 planned speeches. Karoline scanned the email, then looked up at her team. "They expect me to show up, play nice, smile politely, and soften my tone," she said flatly. One aide asked, "Are you going?" "Oh, I'm going," Karoline replied. "But I'm bringing the fire with me." The night of the forum, the Georgetown auditorium was packed. Students, professors, alumni, reporters. The moderator was a polished former ambassador, known for maintaining order. Chuck Schumer's office had declined to send a representative, citing schedule conflicts. Karoline walked on stage in a navy blue blazer and crisp white blouse, the silver cross still gleaming at her collar. No teleprompter. No notes. The applause was polite at first, curious more than supportive. But within moments of speaking, the energy shifted. "I stand here not because I followed their path, but because I left it," she said. "I was told I needed permission to speak. I was told to wait my turn. I didn't." She looked out over the crowd. Some were leaning forward, some were frowning, but all were listening. "You don't have to agree with me," she continued. "You just have to understand this. When speech becomes conditional, power becomes absolute. And when you let them cut the mic, they'll cut more than your words. They'll cut your worth." The moderator attempted to steer the conversation to Trump in 2024, but Karoline redirected gracefully. "This isn't about parties," she said. "It's about principle. I've been called names. I've been mocked for my age. I've been told to smile more, but I will not smile while being silenced." That line hit like thunder. The crowd shifted again. Some clapped, some stayed still, but no one looked away. After the event, a student approached her. "I came tonight to protest you," he admitted. "But I get it now. Not all of it. But the part about not waiting to be heard, I get that." Karoline smiled gently. "That's enough for today." Outside the hall, reporters hounded her for quotes. She kept it brief. "They shut the mic off that day, but they turned something on in here." She tapped her heart and walked into the night, one voice louder than ever. By the end of the week, Karoline's name had crossed into places no press secretary had ventured before. She wasn't just a political figure anymore. She had become a cultural lightning rod. Time ran a cover with her image mid-speech, the headline reading, "Silenced or Sparked," the mic moment that shook Washington. Liberal podcasts debated whether to ignore her or engage. Conservative radio couldn't stop replaying her quotes. Even late-night comedians who once mocked her as Trump's Gen Z mouthpiece now opened their monologues with a cautious disclaimer: love her or hate her, Karoline Leavitt knows how to command a room. Back in D.C., Karoline remained focused, composed. She refused to gloat or chase airtime. Instead, she doubled down on her core message: voice over control, truth over polish. She hosted a roundtable with students from Howard University, many of whom didn't share her political beliefs. Cameras rolled as she calmly fielded their challenges, not avoiding the hard questions, but welcoming them. One student asked bluntly, "Aren't you just using this mic cut thing to rise in the polls?" Karoline didn't blink. "I didn't ask for the mic to be cut, but I chose what to do after it was. That's where the lesson is." Another asked, "What do you say to people who think you're just playing the victim?" "I say this," Karoline replied. "Victims stop, fighters speak. I didn't crumble when they cut me off. I stood up and spoke anyway. That's not victimhood, that's agency." Even the skeptics in the room leaned in after that. That night, MSNBC aired the full clip from the roundtable with a caption that surprised even their own viewers. Karoline Leavitt faces the critics and holds her ground. Meanwhile, in Schumer's camp, the pressure mounted. Staffers leaked that internal polling among Gen Z Democrats showed a dip in trust after the incident. Schumer's approval among young independents had slipped noticeably. A senior strategist finally spoke off-record to the press. "We thought we were silencing noise. We ended up amplifying a voice." But Karoline didn't need their admissions. The public already knew. Her inbox overflowed with messages. Parents, teachers, immigrants, college students, all echoing the same phrase. "They tried to silence you. Now we're speaking louder because of you." She read one message twice. It came from a retired Marine. "I fought for the right to speak freely. You reminded this country what that means. Don't stop." Karoline didn't plan to. The mic they cut had become a symbol, and symbols have staying power. As the Capitol settled into its routine legislative chaos, something else was taking shape. Quieter, but stronger. Karoline's mic moment had begun transforming from a viral incident into a broader cultural movement. What began with a technical cutoff had ignited a firestorm now called the Red Blazer Rebellion, online, named after the outfit she wore when she delivered her Defiant hallway speech. Conservative students at over 40 college campuses began organizing free speech walkouts to protest restrictive speaking rules and biased classroom environments. Some wore red blazers. Others simply carried signs that read, "Mic or not, we speak." Karoline, without ever calling for a protest, had become the symbol of unfiltered youth standing up, not just against the left, but against anyone who muted them. Mainstream outlets scrambled to frame it. Some dismissed the wave as reactionary cosplay. Others called it the modern Tea Party with TikTok reach. But one thing was clear. Karoline had struck a nerve. At a press briefing, one reporter sneered, "Do you feel responsible for these campus disruptions?" Karoline didn't flinch. "I didn't tell anyone to walk out. I just reminded them they don't have to sit down." She turned that answer into a campaign-style clip, 30 seconds of clarity with the line, "Silence isn't policy, it's cowardice." Within 12 hours, it had over 8 million views. Donald Trump retweeted it on Truth Social. "Karoline is a star. She's saying what America feels." Meanwhile, Chuck Schumer tried to move on. He introduced a bland resolution about civic decorum, hoping to shift attention. But his efforts only reignited the flame. A clip surfaced of Schumer avoiding a reporter's question about Karoline, mumbling, "We've said all we're going to say." That silence spoke volumes. Karoline, however, wasn't interested in rubbing it in. Her focus was now sharper. In one interview, she put it clearly, "This was never about me versus Chuck Schumer. It was about the country watching what happens when the people in power pull the plug on the people they don't like." Back in New Hampshire, her hometown paper ran a rare front-page editorial titled, "From Dover to D.C., She Spoke and America Listened." At the White House, her aides began preparing for something bigger, a national address. Not from a stage, not from a network, but from a high school gymnasium in rural America. Karoline's request. "Because that's where voices like mine start," she told them. "And that's where I want the next one to rise." As she stepped out of her office that evening, press still hounding, supporters still cheering, critics still typing, Karoline Leavitt took a deep breath and smiled. They tried to cut her mic. Now the whole country was speaking louder because of her. They cut Karoline Leavitt's mic, thinking they'd silence her. Instead, they amplified her message. She didn't shout. She stood tall, walked out, and spoke louder than ever. In that moment, she proved that truth doesn't need a podium. Because real power isn't in who holds the mic. It's in who dares to speak when it's taken away.